Good morning and welcome to this week's Jump discussion. And this week we're discussing where should leaders be focusing their time. According to Gartner, according to a Gartner survey, the majority of leaders, HR leaders especially, 90% of them believe that in order to thrive in the modern workplace, the leaders need to prioritize the human element of leadership. Leaders who prioritize managing over interaction are 32 less engaged. That's 1.5 times more likely to feel burnt out at the end of a day and 2 times more likely to leave within 12 months of a business. In organizations where leaders actively practice and receive feedback from their managers and from their teams, they're likely to have a higher quality leadership and a stronger talent pool to pull from. 78% of leaders are committed to enhancing their employee engagement in hard times, while 83% of companies acknowledge that the importance of leadership. However, only 5% of corporations actually implement any leadership improvement or any strategy improvement from there. And 3 in 5, that's 59% of employees and business leaders report that their organizations have implemented some measures to safeguard against burnout against their strategy, but almost 29% of employees expressed a desire for an organization to display more empathy in their actions when trying to move forward. So today we're going to talk about what leadership should be focusing on in 2025 to help your business grow and scale and where we come from. So I'm joined by Dave and Martin. Paul's up in Scotland celebrating one of his clients' 10th birthday, and Heather's dealing with some sort of HR issue as always, especially in this time of marketplace.
Not with us, though, Howard.
Not with us. Not with us.
Good.
For a change, that she's not pursuing Paul or yourself or some misdemeanor that you've been up to. But there we go. Right. So let's have a really sort of interactive conversation about this. And if you want to join in the conversation, just put your hand up and have a comment, or put a comment in the box, etc., the chat box, and we can work from there. But I really want to sort of explore our challenges from a leadership point of view, that when we've gone through hard times, how we've helped when we start to come out of that and start to drive. So if we looked at in the landscape where leaders constantly balance day-to-day demands with the bigger picture goals, how do recruitment leaders create more time for strategic focus?
Now, this is where normally Paul would go, right, I'm in. So Martin and I are waiting for him to suddenly appear magically from the right. I think it's a really interesting question on day-to-day demands, because I think one of the challenges, I think, of leadership and that leaders face is that they lose the perspective of the bigger picture, and therefore are kind of fraught with the tension of everything that's happening day to day or week to week. And I think if you can almost daily retain that image of, this is the bigger picture, this is what we're about, this is what I'm hoping to do, this is what I aim to do today with my team, I think it helps to focus on some of the day-to-day things and what's important and what's urgent and what needs to be done. Because as that old saying goes, we all have the same amount of time. We can't create a 25th hour or lose a 23rd hour. We've got the same amount of time. It's just what we do with it. And I think if we have the ability, or can learn that ability, to say, actually, this is the bigger picture, this is what really matters, and then drill it down to the important things, I think that helps. As in leadership, and I've done this as well, you just get sometimes so lost in what's going on day to day that you lose what you're really about. So my encouragement would be to actually remind yourself as a business leader, what is it that I'm about? Why did I set this business up? Where am I going? What do I want? What's the end goal? And then what am I going to do today that helps me achieve that?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that, Dave. I think it's habit forming. You have to treat it as any other part of your sales business, where you need discipline to have power hours to call, to send out content on LinkedIn, wherever it might be. You need to put that time aside for strategic thinking, because it invigorates you as a leader as well, reminding you why you're doing what you're doing. But then I think we've all been in the position as well that you give yourself that time, sit there with a cup of coffee and go, right, what am I going to do now? And it's about having a process to fill that time. And for me, it was always about surrounding myself with people who were interesting, were challenging, had thought leadership, be that thought leaders online that I could read around and I could engage with, ask them questions, because everyone loves being asked questions about their specialist area. Just start the juices flowing. And then I'd also say that for those of you who have staff in your business, this isn't just about you. Give them the opportunity to have time to think strategically about your business, to bring ideas to you, to get your juices flowing. This shouldn't just be you as an island. Get those people in a push-pull relationship about inspiration as well. And you'll find that then takes on a life of its own.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I was talking to a client yesterday, small business, and his question was, should I tell my staff what I'm doing if I'm not filling jobs? And I said, well, tell me what you're doing when you're not filling jobs. And he was talking about, well, I'm looking at the strategy, I'm doing this, I'm looking at the marketing strategy, I'm looking at this strategy, I'm looking at that strategy. I said, absolutely, you should be telling your staff what you're doing. But you should also be telling your staff what you're doing and how, if you get that right, it will benefit them. And this is the difference between reactive and proactive. And I think even that, there's some solopreneurs on the business on the call today. There's some bigger businesses on there. Leaders tend to get pulled, as you said there, Dave, down that rabbit hole sometime. And they're proactively or reactively acting to what's happening now rather than thinking, right, what should I be doing long term and how I should be looking at that. So even solo businesses, some reasons why they fail is because they are too reactive on what's going on today rather than thinking, right, should I work that? Do I have to work that? What's my actual challenge? And again, I was speaking to a client this morning, and that was the same conversation. How do we take your actual job placement ratio from 2 out of 10 to 4 out of 10? Well, it's stop working some of the rubbish that we're working, but that's part of our strategy. Our strategy was to reduce our clients. We went back through the Boston Matrix, was to reduce our client base, okay, to only the primary clients that we're working with, and then find clients that look like those clients. But it's so easy to get dragged into reactive work than thinking about what is proactive and what could you do. And I think that's the bit where when you look at your day-to-day demands, you've got to look at the bigger picture and you've got to take time out to actually say, right, this is what I need to do to make my job easier from a strategic point of view, which will then make everyone else's job easier in the business. So I think it's about that impact that you have. You'd have more impact long-term stuff than you do on the short-term stuff.
Yeah.
So here's a question then that we keep asking, and I'm going to keep asking this until we the market is really flying. The difference between strategy and execution is often where companies thrive and fail. So what advice would you give leaders to bridge the gap and turn strategic goals into a tangible outcome?
You go, Dave. You're the new Paul.
I think there's a whole issue years ago that Harvard Business Review devoted to this, and then that led into further reading. It's one of the great challenges where most people don't succeed as fast or as well as they want to is in the execution. They've got the enthusiasm in some respects, they're in the right market. They've got they know what they want to do, but when it comes to execute, they just don't get it the way that they know they want to. And often that's when we get to talk to some clients and prospects just to help them. I think the execution thing is so important. And the first thing about doing it is recognizing that there is a gap. Because sometimes businesses are performing okay, adequately, quite well, and they're not really seeing there's a problem. And it's not about what you are delivering, it's about what you can deliver in a slightly better market. So if you're performing at 70% in a market that's growing at 120, you're delivering, but you're underperforming because the market's moving much faster. And that's the strategy bit. In the market in which you operate, how are you doing? Where are you? What's going on? What are your customers saying to you about what's going on in their market? So you gain that, you get all that information together strategically, and then you look and say, right, now I need to put more resources here, less resources here, and that gap is the bit that you've literally got to sit down as a leader and go, okay, hang on, let's just take a break for a minute. are we doing as well as we can be? If we're not doing as well as we can be, what are the areas we need to improve upon? And it is what Martin said. It's about taking stock and looking and going, okay, let's look at the gap. There's a gap to bridge. Where do I need to put my resources?
Yeah, and companies that fail to get the execution part right, they can do that in multiple ways. One could be that they're failing to execute successfully. So they're trying the right things and not doing it correctly, or they're executing in a direction that's taking them away from their strategic plan because they've lost sight of what that goal is. So my first advice would be make sure that your strategic goal is inspiring enough that keeps you on that path, and that you communicate it with your staff, with your peers, with your clients and candidates, so that you keep focused on that. But then as soon as you have that strategic goal, what is the first step you're going to take? What are the first one or two things you're going to do in the next week, month, quarter? I'm less interested in what steps you're going to do in the next 6-12 months. You'll build that momentum, but make sure you have that immediate action that you can take to give you confidence and build some success, get some momentum, and start celebrating. Start feeling that you're moving forwards. That difference between that long-term wow vision and that short-term first steps, I think, are the key actions.
It's interesting, isn't it? When you start to speak there, Dave, I wrote two words down. I wrote motivation and consistency down.
Right.
And I think what we do when we start to, let's look at the start of any business year. Okay. You start with this massive motivation, everyone's high, expectations are high, and we're doing that. And sometimes that starts to fail because we start to have a strategy versus execution gap, and those things start to appear. And so motivation starts to drop very, very quickly. Okay. And you talk about any sporting environment, you go out that first 10 minutes, you get that first motivation, and then you get that drop, don't you? And it's getting the second win back. But that second win comes back through the consistency of the training, the consistency of your performance to make sure that you can carry on doing that. So you've got to start to think is that you're always going to get that spike of motivation, but when it starts to fail, it's about the consistency. So is your strategy able to create consistency in the performance, i.e. billing and generating cash? If it's not, then you've got to start to think, is my strategy right? If you think the strategy is right, then you look at the execution of that strategy. Are we training the people to actually deliver consistently over a period of time? And the more consistent we get at delivery, then the more consistent our growth will start to come. And so I always think when we think about that execution gap, we can look at the processes, we can look at things that are causing that. The first thing I look at is how motivated are our team to actually deliver, and then how consistent are we at delivering what we're being asked to deliver. Long gone are the days where it's just like work harder, spend more time on the phone, etc., because that's not going to close the gap. What you've got to do is find out what closed the gap and then get consistently good at reviewing that gap, closing it down, and then delivering what we need to deliver. So motivation will get you part of the way, but the thing that gets you all the way is that consistency and hanging on to that consistency. And your comment there, Martin, was really interesting about changing the habits. It's so easy if it's not working to step back into an old habit that might work but won't work as well, but we haven't consistently done the new habit so it's becoming ingrained and then starts to create consistent results. And I think we're often too quick to jump from the new to the back to the old again without actually thinking we're close enough to now get to that point where it should start to consistently create results. And therefore we create failure because we're jumping from strategy to strategy to strategy rather than being consistent at what we're doing from there. Looking at the market then, it's really competitive at the moment with regards to growing the talent landscape that we need. So what will it take to achieve consistent revenue based on the talent landscape at the moment in 2025?
I can answer this in two ways. If you want consistent annuity revenue and you're running a recruitment business, then a very obvious answer is make sure that you have contractors or temps as well as permanent staff, because that gives literally consistent revenue. Because if you've got contractors out, it also adds value to your business, and it makes your business less wavy with the ups and downs of permanent staff not starting. Now, that isn't easy to just change and overnight become a contract or temp recruiter if you only do perm. But if you as a leader are thinking about strategic input for 2025, and all you do, and you may do it really well, but all you do is permanent business, then a strategic thought you may have is, for consistency, I may like to look at placing temps, placing contractors. And again, you can look at which markets to go into. We know, for instance, the States is going to see a huge uptick in freelancers and contractors. So that's something that, from a strategic point of view, you can think about. That's a market. As a leader, that's a market look. And if you do search, you may want to do interim. You know, we're going to take 3 to 6 to 8 months, whatever, to find you this person. In the meantime, have you considered an interim person? So that's one part of the answer. The other part that I focus on, and I'm sure Martin will have other thoughts as well, is your own people. You know, are you secure in your own mind that your own people are happy working in your organisation? If they're happy, they will work more productively, they will work better, they will demonstrate loyalty, there'll be that extra incentive to work. And a lot of leaders I talk to are like, yeah, they're delighted. And then you speak to them about 3 or 4 weeks later and somebody's left. And it was a surprise. And we've all been there. We've all joined and left organizations. We've all had surprising resignations that we hadn't planned. So I think as you're thinking about 2025, look at your market and the services that you provide and make sure you're on top of the people that are working for you and what is their motivation. Are they aware of the bigger picture? Are they aware of where they fit into the bigger picture?
Yeah, I think that's the first part you said as well, Dave, about the strategic thing. I think is absolutely right. Understand where the opportunity is for that consistency of revenue. Yeah. And then I'll talk about the consistency from an execution perspective as well, and how we've chatted about this a lot recently. Is the metric of a successful pipeline has shifted from how many jobs do I have on to how many candidates do I have in market. So rather than saying, I've got 3 CVs to every job, it should be how many jobs am I sending my best candidates to? And that control of the process in a candidate type market will help give you that consistency. If you've got someone that's in demand across multiple organizations and you've got that candidate in front of the right people, your chances of placing that candidate are vastly increased. And then also, what are you doing with your second and third place candidates? Where are you sending them? So that's shifting mindset from I'm going to focus on getting my candidates to market rather than getting requirements, I think will help build out that consistency from an execution side.
Yeah.
So carrying on that conversation then, Martin, what we were talking about, if you think about that, there's people on here that just do perm only and don't want to do temp. And there's people on here that's doing a mixture. And I think it's about that pipeline. I think, are we focusing on the right pipeline? So if you think you've got a pipeline of 50K and you've got 3 candidates going to each client, your candidate pipeline's 150K. So are we focusing on the right pipeline? And your conversation there, your comment there, Martin, is absolutely right. It's about that consistency of how often do you get candidates to multiple opportunities rather than having your candidate at one opportunity. And I think that's the sort of thing. And I looked at this time of year, and it was this time of year that I used to play the what if game with all of my business. And my what if game was this for clients was, what if the client doubled? How are we going to cope? What if the client flatlines? What are we going to do? What if the client decreases? What are we going to do? Now, if you start to think of the marketplace, more people are flatlining than decreasing at the moment than going up, but there are some going up. So we've got to start to look at our pipeline. Our pipeline of clients is going to start to get smaller, but our pipeline of candidates will decrease quicker. However, that pipeline of candidates is still more valuable because there's more people recruiting. So the consistency, I think, when we start to think about consistent growth is simple. If we start to think that we are obscure in the marketplace and understand that most recruitment agencies are genuinely obscure in their marketplace, then there are lots of more opportunities out there. So our business development has to grow, but what we've got to be able to do is provide product to our clients. So when our clients ask us for product, we actually have the product rather than going out job board searching, et cetera, et cetera. So developing our candidate database becomes really important in a hard market when we start to recover, because if you can place candidates in front of clients, they will start to come back to you, whether they want that client now or in the future. They'll start to come back to you because you'll be known for having product, which is a huge differentiator in the marketplace. And so I think the metrics and KPIs that we should be looking at is what you talked about there, is on the temp side, how many temps have you got in play and how many temps on your CRM are out of play that could be put back into play. Same with contractors. The perm marketplace is exactly the same. How many perm candidates have you got on your marketplace that you could be placing that are on the market, not in the market? Because they're on the market, they're looking to their place. In the market is the bit that we should be developing, because they're the ones, the 60% that would move if a right job was put in front of them, rather than the 20% that's on the market looking for a job. So I think we've got to start to think about consistency of developing our own data and how we mine that data and then take it to clients. So we've got to think, don't rely on your own client base, rely on your candidate base, because that will grow more clients for you.
And Howard, before you move on, I'd also say we've always been obsessed with getting exclusivity from customers for requirements. Have the mindset to get candidate exclusivity, particularly on perm. Now, I will take you to multiple customers, but I need your commitment that you'll work with me exclusively for a period of time. Because you're right, you can take that money to the bank then, because you know that candidate's placeable.
Yeah. And if you get that candidate 3 or 4 opportunities, then that's better than if you've got one candidate that's got one opportunity that you know that's got 3 opportunities elsewhere. That's a 25% fill rate. If you've got a candidate with 4 opportunities, you should put that candidate into a job. Yes, you've got a different conversation with 3 clients that you've failed, but the clients have got to understand it's a product. It's not an exclusive product to them. It's an exclusive product to us. They've got to react quicker and faster and be able to sell themselves better. So the question that always comes up, as technology now continues to reshape recruitment, how should leaders approach integrating these tools without losing the human touch that define great recruitment?
Well, if you are using AI tools to take away as many of the more mundane tasks that being a recruiter uses, it goes back to that first question. We've all got the same amount of time, but suddenly you've created more time. Yeah. Now, I know I argued earlier on you can't create time because we've all got the same amount of time. But the point is, are you, as a business leader, using AI tools that are available to help you have more time to spend on the human things? I think AI is a great innovation, or AI tools and the way we use them is great for recruiters who are able to have conversations and hold relationships, because that's what recruitment is. That's the bit that can't be completely outsourced or completely given to AI, over to AI, because you get to the heart of, to the candidate, what is it? Why do you want to leave this job? And you kind of hand hold them through the leaving, the joining, and the staying. Yeah, that's difficult to do just by computer alone. So the question I would ask as you as leaders is, what tools are you using, if any? Are you aware of what's out there? And can you make more of the 8 hours of the day into building relationships with clients, building relationships with candidates? And to the point on the last question, so somebody asked me, what's the best type of recruitment company? And I said rather glibly, but I meant it, the one with the most jobs for the candidates. And I didn't mean have hundreds of jobs. I meant have, say, 10, 20 candidates, but they've got a choice of 5 jobs, rather than 5 agencies with 5 different jobs and the candidate chooses. If you can get more jobs for your candidates, your most placeable candidates, you've got more chance of success. And using AI to take away some of the mundane tasks can help you do that. And if you've got that time, then spend time cultivating, networking with candidates and prospects.
Yeah. And I would say that the amount of AI products on the market grow every day, and then it's exponentially faster than that.
Yeah.
You start by looking around going, oh, what is out there in AI? You will very quickly go mad. Start with, what problem am I trying to solve in my business? And I would expect nearly all of the people on this call, if not all of them, to say, I would want to spend more time with my customers and candidates. So if the problem you're trying to fix is to enable you to do that, then AI will support that human touch, not go against it. And if you're working and putting an AI tool into your system that's preventing you to do that, you're trying to solve the wrong problem, and you've gone tech first as opposed to problem first. So just keep that mindset of what am I trying to solve in my business, and then apply AI to that. I think naturally it will then enable you to spend more time with customers and candidates.
Yeah, it's good advice.
It's interesting, isn't it? We've talked so much about AI and how AI works and what have you, and it's doing the heavy lifting. I think the first thing we need to sort of understand is that AI isn't going to do our job for us. And I think a lot of recruitment agencies have, it was interesting listening to your first comments there, Dave. I instantly wrote down lazy. Lots of recruitment agencies
Dave, I don't
become
think you're lazy, mate. I think you're a hard worker.
Yeah, I know. The abuse model is just. I'm phone.
You need to phone Heather. No, but what I mean by lazy is that we are expecting AI to do it for us. And one of the things that we keep hearing is, how do I differentiate my business? What do I do to differentiate my business? You go and speak to the clients of most recruitment agencies to differentiate your business. The easiest way to do that is to go and visit and speak and talk to your clients rather than email, etc., etc. And I think we've got that little bit of laziness. And I think we look at a certain age demographic where we're used to calling clients because that's how we would talk, what we did, we were on the phone. You look at the younger demographic and they are struggling in that style of communication because they've only communicated through electronic versions of communication, etc. So we've got to start to retrain our lower or younger age group that actually, to differentiate yourself, you need to be out speaking, etc. So I think AI, as you said, will do the heavy lifting, but what does the actual push it over the edge is going out and actually speaking to, being with your clients, your candidates, etc. And so that comment about being lazy is, don't let AI do it for you. If you want to differentiate yourself, go out and be different. So it's interesting. We talk about the difference in sort of age groups and the different in the marketplace and etc. What emerging trends or shifts should recruitment leaders keep on their radar as we moved into 2025?
Well, what do our customers want? They want to make the right hire as fast as and intelligently as they can, knowing they have the right data. Yeah, that's essentially that's what customers want. They pay us to be the broker for that talent. So on that basis, one of the trends absolutely I'm seeing is where the recruitment consultant becomes the talent advisor. Because most of the companies we deal with don't have TAs. Yeah, the bigger companies do, but most companies don't. They may have less than 30 staff, and we place 2 or 3 people a year with them. That's the majority of the type of clients that most recruitment companies place on. So what is it that they want? They want market data. They want that data to be intelligently presented, and with that data, they want the advice that says, actually, this is what we think you should do. And I've used this phrase before, that the role of the recruitment consultant is ever more consultant than recruiter. They know you can find them people, but now you're becoming the advisor. Howard, we've spoken about this before as well, the trusted advisor. I'm not going to go to market until I've spoken to Dave or Martin or Howard at this X company, because they know what's going on in the market. So an absolute trend is the recruiters becoming more data savvy, more customer savvy, more market savvy. And if you've got people that are like that in your business, that can hold those conversations, that can interpret and articulate data, then you're going to be in for a good 2025. That's one trend. There may be type others, but that's one.
I totally agree with that. I think also using data to drive your own decision making. The trend I would be looking for in the market now, and I'm going to be glass half full here, because hiring intentions for H1 do look improved on 2024. So let's be optimistic. And I think as demand grows, the skills gap that we've probably yet to really feel acutely in the UK is going to be even more painful for customers. The demand might raise, but the candidates won't be there for them. So I would want to be looking at the trends where that gap is the most acute, and that's where data comes in. How do I, as a business, know that my consultants and me are pointing in the right areas to embed myself now with that candidate population? So when demand increases, I know where the rare candidates are. That's what I'd be looking to put myself in front of now.
It's interesting, isn't it, that we look at that, and I think what you're talking about there, Dave, is a KPI that I use. You need to become the key person of influence in your marketplace, and you need to really influence your marketplace. And it was interesting, Martin, listening to your conversation there. I read a data set the other day from the ONS, which was really, really interesting. So we're 28 periods of downturn in the number of jobs, and we are 35,000 jobs less than we were last month, and that's now at 841,000 jobs. What it didn't say was what it says on another article from the ONS was, since lockdown, there are 800,000 less employable people in the UK due to retirement, etc., etc., etc. So if you start to look at the trend, we go back to what we say about that shifting, reshaping recruitment, and how we look at and how AI is reshaping recruitment. If we're looking at our candidates and taking our candidates to marketplace, that to me is the trend that we should be looking at. How many new candidates have I got into my system? How many new candidates are compliant? How many of those candidates have I got out to work? How many of those candidates have I got engaged in the recruitment process? What am I doing to engage my candidate base? Because if our candidate base is dropping by 800,000 every 4 years, then we've got a real problem coming up with supply and demand. And if we're just looking at the demand and not the supply, then you're looking at the wrong end of the problem.
Yeah.
So how can leaders then foster a culture of adaptability and resilience in their teams and thrive amid all this change? There's loads of change that's happening. How do we create a thriving environment?
Literally spend time working on it. I mean, that sounds like a very, very glib answer, but I think a lot of companies do some training. They either use external people or they've got the skills inside to do it. But actually spend time. What is resilience? How can you become more resilient in this market? How do you as an individual display resilience in your company and perhaps also in your personal lives that you can weave into it? Actually train on resilience and train on adaptability. Change is constant. It happens all the time. We've navigated through the bigger things like Brexit and COVID and all the political storms that we've had. But actually, it's the day-to-day stuff. I want 10 of these now. I only want 4. I know I said I want to start on Monday. Can they start in 2 weeks? All of those things. It's why I like recruitment, because everything changes so often. But are you training your staff on change and what is about change? I remember when I was at a big company many years ago, and we had to read Who Moved the Cheese. That little management book.
Yeah.
Small. And I remember we all sitting there thinking, well, I mean, this is like a really old book. It's, we're important executives. We haven't got time to read things like Who Moved the Cheese. It was brilliant. Absolutely, it reminded us all of what we'd forgotten. But what was important wasn't the fact that the boss told us to read it. We then had to put a training session together for the staff on it. So not only did we read it, we absorbed it, and then we had to, train on it. And I think that's important. It doesn't matter whether you're running a company of 4 people or 400 people. Do your people know what adaptability is? Do they know about change, and are you training them on it? Because if you are, you've got a better chance. Because one thing we do know is the market will be stronger next year, but there'll also be turbulence that we can't foresee, and it's how we can best address that.
Yeah, agreed. And I went through exactly the same thing with that book as well. And then also,
really?
My Iceberg is Melting is another one that gets you to focus on. It might feel nice today, but coming down the road. So yeah, really, really interesting. But I would say as well that coming back to that strategy question, link your individual staff's ambitions to your company strategy. Make them feel part of something bigger than just themselves and their desk, so that they will be prepared to run through more brick walls for you. They will do things above and beyond just billing on their desk, and that will build their own personal resilience. And that culture you talked about, Howard, that's how you build it from the bottom up. Make them realize that you're all in this together, and that if they are executing in the way that you're asking them to, you will support them. You're in it together with them, because to Dave's point earlier, there will be bumps in the road. People will have tough times, but if they're doing the right things in the right way, you will support them as a leader and have their back.
It's I'm listening to the pair of you, and I'm sort of thinking, right, okay, where do I add? What do I add in? And I think there's a real sort of question here about motivation. We talk about adaptability and resilience, and we talk about training. You talk about solopreneurs, bigger businesses, etc. If you think about solopreneurs, they need accountability, and they need someone to tell them they're doing well. They need someone point them in the right direction and help them and train them on doing various different things. And while that might be just re-engaging their brain in bits that they've forgotten or things that they should be doing or could be doing, etc. But when you start thinking about bigger business, I always think about that, the market changes consistently. And that is what is consistent, that the market changes. But our training and our development of our recruitment processes do not change consistently. We just keep the same old one and hope it just matches whatever's coming up next. So if you want to motivate your staff, train them on the new technologies, the new processes. That then creates consistency in delivery, but it doesn't only just contain consistent delivery, it creates consistent motivation. And that consistent motivation creates people who want to stay with your business. So the more we actually engage with our people and the more we engage with our process, train and develop them, and as you're saying there, Martin, match them to the bigger goals, then all of a sudden that creates motivation. That motivation, if you then change that to the habit, creates consistency, and that will create constant economic growth over a period of time.
Yeah. I used to have a manager who worked for me. He was obsessed with building a sales culture. And I support that mindset. Let's do it. And his first thing was, can I have a few £100 to take my staff out for beers then? And it was like, well, success culture, the word success is the first thing. So let's set some benchmarks and some milestones that we can achieve. Because when I think back to the most fun I've had in recruitment, it's when you achieve something that was tough. It's when you win together as a group. It's not just going out for beers. That's celebrating the hard work you've done. So you've got to get those rocks in the way that you are going to aim for as a business and that you're going to achieve. And then you can celebrate and have fun.
It was quite interesting on that behavior. I had the same conversation just after lockdown with one of my clients, and the same thing. Oh, we need to set a target, an easy target to get people out and do certain things. And I said, well, if you set your target too low, then the expectation isn't great, etc. So we set 3 different targets. First target was, if we hit this target, which was 90% of the target that they wanted to hit, then we'll have a barbecue in the car park. Hit the target, we'll go out to a nice fancy restaurant. Hit 20% over the target, they had a weekend in London, all expenses paid, go to a show, etc., etc. Guess what? They hit the London target because all of a sudden the motivation was there, the consistency was there, and they could see what they could get in each individual thing. No one wanted to have a barbecue in the car park.
Yeah.
But, it's worked from there. So last question then. What advice would you give to recruitment leaders about balancing short-term goals with long-term vision?
I think one of the things we don't talk much about in leadership, but it does apply to this question, is that people today gravitate to leaders who listen. So if we can understand where our staff are coming from, what their personal motivations are and their business motivations, and we know our bigger goals, our longer term goals and our short term goals, if you can match those two together in some way, then I think you're going to have a more successful 2025. if you're the type of leader that says, right, 2025, this is what you're doing, this is where we're going, this is how we're going to do it, that can work, but it's not going to work as well as if you've listened to where your staff are coming from and what they're saying. It doesn't mean you have to execute everything that they say. You can take it on board and say, actually, this is what we're going to do, and thank you for that input. And yeah, but it's just giving your staff the opportunity. Leaders who listen are more successful than leaders who instruct. And I think that's one of the things we've learned for the last few years since we've had COVID. Eye to eye, conversations, empathy is really important. Because you're a leader, because you do have a long-term goal, you do have the strategy, you do have the execution, accountability. That's why you're a leader. So what makes you different to everybody else? And I think it's the listening bit to make sure that you've got your people brought in.
Yeah, couldn't say that any better, Dave. That's spot on. I think this balance is the toughest job of a leader, particularly in a tough market, because everything around you screams at you to pay attention, and it's the easiest thing to do is to get distracted from this balance. And I would say that I hear repeatedly from customers that it's a lonely place, being a solopreneur, but also being a leader in a business with staff. And it's lonely because you don't listen, you don't have those conversations, you don't value your resource, of which your staff is a key resource. They can challenge you, they can inspire you, they can bring new ideas, and it's as valuable for them to realize their leader is listening as it is for you as a leader to listen. So I think that is a really good way of overcoming that challenge.
I think there's not a lot I could add to that except this. Yeah, your conversation there, Dave, was quite interesting about it doesn't mean you have to change something. Okay. But listening is really important. But I think what's more important from a motivational point of view is when you make the change that you're highlighting, Dave brought this idea to us. This is what we're implementing. This is what we're moving with. And people can start to see that you listen to change. And if it's right and implement it, then all of a sudden it starts to work. And that was the thing that, I did an awful lot of that, but I would always credit the person who came up with the idea and mention that. And then all of a sudden, lots of people started to come and talk about things that they could change. And this sort of helped remove blockers from the strategy. It's, we look at the gap in the strategy. It helped us close the gap because they could tell you this is really slowing me down. If you can help with this, etc. And if you went back honestly and said, look, I've gone away to the IT people, they can't change any of that, etc. But here's a workaround, then they'd understand that. But if you could change something and you could demonstrate you could change it and actually change it, then that was really critical. And I think then from the bigger point, when I was a deco, sometimes going to the high echelons of a deco and having that conversation about their strategies a little bit flawed, all of a sudden, it was why. And so I always think if you're going to challenge, you've got to have an idea of what you can swap that for this and how that would work. And again, once they implemented that or gave you the reason why it wouldn't be implemented, then again, it created motivation and it helped with the consistency. And I think a lot of things that we've talked about today lead back to, in a hard time, you need everyone to be motivated in your corner to actually push forward. And to do that, you've got to listen to what they do. You've got to create consistency in what you're doing and celebrate those wins along the way. Ladies and gents, thank you very much for your time. It's been very much appreciated. Martin, Dave, thank you very much for your input. It's interesting that it's 11:44, nearly 11:45. Paul obviously only talks for a minute then on those webinars because we've talked quite eloquently from there. And I'll remind him of that when I see him next, that he can only talk for a minute next week. But for those who don't know, next week, complete new webinar. Feel free to join us. Thank you for your time. Dave, Martin, thank you very much. See you all next week.
Cheers, team. Well done, everybody. Have a good week.